Hello and welcome to this podcast where I want to basically talk about immigration and why I hate it because I can't buy a house. How you doing, Tom?
Good. Thank you very much for having me, Callum.
This is Connor, for people who don't know, and we went to university together.
Yes, we had the misfortune of being hounded by the university activists at the time, but we survived, and it's wonderful to see
Because
you again.
of Carl's bad words in
Spicy
the past.
takes, yes.
Yeah,
I still have the flyer that they were handing out.
Anyway, how's your search for a house going?
Oh, utterly dreadful. Just about as well as every other millennial and Gen Z of our generation. I wonder what the cause is.
Yeah, and we have some people who have their opinions on what the cause might be. And we'll start off with some rightists, I think I'll say, which is their response. Firstly, we have Julia Hartlett-Brewer decided to tweet this out, which is here's the flagship housing policy for you to announce. Boris Johnson, you're welcome, build more houses. And
well, if that's the standard for political commentary, the girl on TikTok that said, I don't get why people are homeless, just buy a house, forehead, is going to have a stellar career.
Well, there's an argument you could say from a right-wing perspective. It's like, oh, we don't have enough houses, just build more.
I mean,
Great.
that's the monopoly take, but...
Thanks for not thinking this through. I really like Julia as well, which is why I was annoyed by this, particularly triggered by...
Oh, I've been on her show. She's lovely.
Yeah.
When you can get word in edgeways, because she does do 5-minute questions.
She's a good host, though. If we go to the next one here, we can see the fact as well. This was mirrored by left-wing MPs. So we have Labour MP saying here, you know what radical housing policy would actually be? I promise to build 100,000 more council houses a year.
I wonder if he got that from his alleged Chinese donors by any chance.
Yeah, Bergen over there. And if we go to the next one, we then have other Labour... well, he's a mayor, isn't he? Not an MP. Sadiq Khan, basically blaming the fact that everyone in our age group is whining about the house prices is because of council housing. Again, him whining here on Instagram. And if we go to the next one here, we can see the other rightist.
Very loose terminology there.
Yeah, I'm not a big fan of Tom Harwood's takes, to say the least. And this one pissed me off the most, which is I've had all this data just sat around for a long time, and this is what spurred me to be like, all right, we're doing this.
Yes.
Today. So this is a tweet from Harwood in which he says, any housing policy that doesn't focus on building more houses isn't worth the paper it's written on. And it's a GB News segment of him whining that something happened in the 90s. I don't know what, but...
Some people did something.
Some people did something, and some guys died. I don't know, 9/11 kind of take of don't look into it, don't question it, but something happened, and then the house prices went up. So the problem is clearly the number of houses and nothing else. If we go to the next one here, we can see he also went on Question Time to talk about this, as you can see. And yeah. I thought we'd play a clip of Tom Harwood's thought process, is what I'm going to call it. Let's play.
Housing and wages had tracked each other. The cost of housing and the growth in earnings tracked each other until the late 1990s, and then something happened. And house prices just spiraled out of control. Unless we are building more than 300,000 homes a year, unless we are actually keeping pace with demand, right up until the early, or indeed the late 1990s, house price growth tracked wage growth. And then something happened at the end of the 1990s.
What is that something?
If it starts with bony tear, then... See, this is the problem with Question Time, though. As you had Julia Hartlett-Brewer's tweet up earlier, she's probably the most... right-wing person they've had in quite a while, most of the rightists, and even they brought her on to bash Partygate, and so the days of David Dimbleby are well true and gone, because I've been on Tom's show, and I've met him in person, and I will reserve my judgment of him, but it's very clear that Tom, women can have a penis Harwood, is not the most representative of the sort of cultural gut that a lot of the British have beyond the Westminster bubble.
But he's also just not looking into the issue.
No.
I mean, purposely so. When you openly say something happened and then just move on.
Yes.
And refuse to think, what was that something that happened in the late 90s? Well, what was the thing that happened there that changed the country? What could it be that suppresses wages?
Or more accurately, who?
But also puts up house prices? What could possibly do that? My gut feeling will obviously be immigration, which is why I'm whining about it.
I'm willing to bet.
Yeah. So I thought I'd look into the data and find out what's true and what's not, because, of course, the complaint from, as you can see, Julia and Tom there in tandem, saying that, no, the big problem is just the demand. We need to build more houses. It's a supply side problem. That's it. It's got nothing to do with the demand side. It's got nothing to do with the high demand, which is totally organic and natural. From the native British people, I am sure.
Yes, because, of course, babies, as soon as they come out of the womb, need their own house.
Of course. And if we go to the next one here, we can see Figure 1. This is from the Migration Watch group, who I love, which is featured in the shitty meme I made, which you can see the change, the thing that might have changed in the 1990s, late 1990s. As you can see there, from 1997, 1988, massive uptick in immigration. I mean, just huge. This is net migration. It goes from, what, under 100,000 a year for most years for British history, from the 80s and 90s, to being up to 200 and then 300,000, and keeps going.
And that's not even accounting for the people that used to smuggle themselves in trucks over the Calais border and then now are arriving, the seafaring insurgents before that.
Nah, the sea people, not part of that statistic. And if we go to the next one as well, we can see, well, okay, there's a lot of people coming in, but it doesn't necessarily mean we've got a problem. What's the amount of houses we're building? So, Full Fact says the houses being built from the 90s till 2008, say there's about 170,000 Thua Council houses. Sorry, 170,000 houses being built there, as you can see. From 1990s to 2008, you see an uptick as well. So the idea that we're just not building enough houses from the sense of, well, there's been a huge fall in the number of houses being built. There is, as you can see, from the 70s to 2010, and just pure houses being built. But for that period, the thing that really changes it, as Tom Harwood noted, something that happened in the 1990s. It is not a huge drop in the building of houses.
No.
From 1990 to 2008, it's pretty stable there. It's not the thing that changes. If we go to the next one as well, we can also see the fact that just polling on this, which is not alone in being pissed, wanting a cheap house. As you can see here, this is party voters being polled here, saying there's a housing crisis. Basically, everyone says yes. Who would like more housing? Yes, is practically the answer you can see there from everyone. I mean, the Conservatives being the lowest at 42%, which is you would have thought surprisingly high.
I would love to see, though, a breakdown of which party's to blame for this by party, because I have the strong suspicion that both Labour and Lib Dem would say Conservative, whereas the Conservative voters would also say Conservative.
Yeah.
Because the local government constituencies, obviously, Labour are happy to take mass importing of refugees and seafarers because they get paid and they get a voter base. The Lib Dems, generally, they're the sort of more West Country types that own property, and so are the more NIMBY-ish types, as was spoken about on Question Time the other night. But then the Conservatives themselves, they sort of have the inexplicable thing of being caught between a rock and a hard place, where they won't lower immigration, and they also have the perverse financial incentive of having so many of their donors be invested in property.
What was it, like 30 million or something?
I actually did have the stat, but it was 20% of all donors from 2010 to 2020 had contributed about 80% of their total donations. It's gone as high as 25% for the Financial Times reporting. So clearly, if you want to gauge the prices to ensure that your mates have a lot of money, you're going to inflate the demand and make sure the supply is somewhat constricted.
Yeah, so that's the one party that's screwed, and the other one that just basically wants diversity because votes, if nothing else.
To rub the right's nose in it, of course.
Yeah, as well. But if we go to the next one here, we have the left's response to all this, at least you can see in The Guardian, who decided, no, the real problem is landlords.
Yes, I did see this, actually. Boris's announcement yesterday, people were saying, oh, it's terrible if he's expanding the Help to Buy scheme, because lots of those houses were actually listed as private properties to be leased later on. And it's like, well, number one, if they're independent letters, that would be fine. However, we sort of have a renting culture. And why do we have this renting culture? Why is it all of a sudden that you get a higher return on investment for making perpetual property serfs rather than just selling? Could it be a supply and demand issue?
I love this that people think, oh, because it's a house, economics no longer works.
Yes.
Like, no, supply and demand still exist. They still affect the prices. This is not some magical good that you can just be like, well, that doesn't adhere to the law of economics. Like, no, of course it does.
It's the same with infrastructure. I went to a Conservative Environment Network conference, and of all people, Tom Holland, the historian, was the most conservative there. And he did point out the fact that his village, I believe it was near Avon, he said, oh, all the rivers have run dry because all the water's been redirected to the River Thames just to sort out the sewage system, because it hasn't been upgraded since the Victorian times, but the population is massively centralised and swelled. So we do have a resource allocation problem, and if you centralise everything, hey presto, you're going to have issues if the rate of upgrade is outpaced by the rate of influx.
And what is the thing that changed in the 1990s? Well, I suppose we'll keep asking that question, because the Guardian side, as they say, to go with the landlords here, they say in here, the top priority for these corporate landlords is pleasing their shareholders. Left unchallenged, the fiscalisation of housing could make cities unaffordable for everyone but the affluent. And I'm just like, yeah, why? Why are they able to get away with that? Because if there isn't huge, endless demand for more rented properties, then funnily enough, you're not able to just turn loads of houses into rents because there won't be the demand for them.
I love the idea that it's all the shareholders rather than the stakeholders for our old buddy Klaus Schwab's theory, because one of the main private landowners in the UK is trying to be Lloyd's Bank. and they're actually very much partnered along with the rest of the financial institutions with the WEF. And one of the things that's driving up development is all of the ESG style environmental costs. So we worked with the UK Green Building Council to look at things like this when I've been working with the British Conservation Alliance, and a lot of it is things like climate change mitigation damage insurance. They're basically selling you the premise that it's going to be so apocalyptic, you've got to take out extra insurance for weather events and things like this. And also you've got to have all of these emissions offsetting considerations when you're building things. But obviously the materials aren't there. So either you're using sort of in-demand but very costly materials where you could just have regular substitutes, or you're doing token tree planting efforts in the middle of nowhere because with improper species, etc., just because you have to offset it. And then the regulatory environment. I mean, if you're looking at the heat pump flip-flop, you're looking at a certain amount has to come from renewable sources, you're looking at meeting all these random offsetting targets. Is that a very appealing environment to invest in? So the idea that it's all just corporate landlords trying to turn a profit is sheer nonsense.
Yeah, it's just demonstrably on every level. But it's just the more fundamental thing, which is, well, why is a landlord able to... I mean, I see these videos pop up on my YouTube shorts all the time of some guy and is like, he's 25, and he's telling you about how he brought this property and turned it into an Airbnb, and he made a load of money and then did another one, and how you can do it too, kind of thing. But these things are real. People do make money from buying up loads of properties and renting them. And the question is, well, why? Why are they able to do that endlessly?
But did you see the Kirsty Allsop Telegraph column in February of this year that said, young people, if you skip your Netflix subscriptions and your gym memberships, you can save up for a house? Her father is actually a baron and her husband is a property developer, and so she herself has become a private letter. So it's like, congratulations, you're giving us basically sit in the pod and eat the bugs advice.
Just be born with a baron for a lord.
Yeah, just buy a house.
Morons. If we get the next one, we have the Times as well. So this is a more right-wing perspective on the matter. And they blame, of course, the low interest rates. So they say in here, you don't need to be John Maynard Keynes to recognize the common feature that explains this shrinking international phenomena. It's extremely low interest rates, aided and abetted by a policy of quantitative easing, which has pumped large amounts of money into the system. And I don't like either of these. I don't like either of these analysis, because neither of them get to the nub of the issue, which is, well, why are you able to keep interest rates so low and therefore have all this property being brought up by endless people?
He also positions John Maynard Keynes as an authority on anything other than being a bit of a nonce.
Yeah,
so we shouldn't take his word for gospel.
But there's both of these people which are just blaming people for buying houses, and it's just like, why? But like, people buy houses and then rent them out and they make loads of money. How dare they do that? It's like, right, if you don't like that they're able to do that endlessly, well then what's the problem? The problem is the endless demand that feeds that cycle. They never address the actual reason for the demand. If we go to the next one as well, we can see the fact that, Michael Gove, at least one person in government, did notice this before this question time thing, which everyone suddenly realised, hang on a tick, houses are quite expensive, in which he just whines in here depressingly about house prices in London. It's like, okay, swing and a miss. It's like, don't you know that house prices in London are costing the Conservatives votes?
Yeah, you're never going to make inroads in London. Though I did see something absolutely staggering, and as a native Londoner myself, I'm never going to be able to live in my home city. But
it's impossible.
Yeah. Not without the stab-proof vest either. But the actual mortgage for a first-time buyer in London is equivalent to the total mortgage for most the average one up north. So it's just okay. Can we look at the centralisation of population over time and see if there's a corollary there?
But also just the absurdity of Conservatives noticing, yes, we've made the country completely unlivable.
Yes.
That's
right. I'm a Conservative.
That's a problem because we can't get votes in London anymore. You never got votes in London. Like, what kind of weird mindset is that? But if we go to the next one here, there's also just a point, and I probably should have made this sooner, but replacement rate. This is why I'm blaming the immigration policies being the problem for this, not the native population or UK-born population, because as you can see there, newest data, 2020, lowest recorded replacement rate on record, ever.
Yeah, so much for the lockdown baby boom.
1.58. There we have it. There's a fun fact. Can you guess where is the lowest in the country?
Ooh, that's actually quite interesting. I don't want to say the obvious and say London.
No, it's worse.
Oh, go on then.
It's for a funnier reason, though. If we go to the next one, it's Brighton.
Oh no.
Which, I don't know, just makes me laugh. For people who don't know, Google it.
That's quite tragic, actually.
Yeah, but it's also just a fun fact there.
Yes.
But you can see it kind of replicated, essentially, throughout the country as well. It's just in particular areas such as Luton, which have a future, which, also tells you about those places.
Mm-hmm.
Go to the next one, though, we can see the fact that, so we're not replacing ourselves, as in the British-born population not replacing themselves. well, then why would they need endless amounts of new houses, Mr. Harwood?
Hmm.
They wouldn't. It's for the immigrants. And as you can see here, you have some chap mentioning the fact that, don't worry, guys, all is well. Immigration has reached, 1 million people this year have come to the UK.
Yeah, it's pretty staggering. I've had a lot of conversations with people in the sort of liberal policy sphere about this, and they seem quite apathetic, and they often make them a GDP argument rather than any sort of cultural consideration whatsoever. And they sit on the same sort of fence as the leftist materialists who believe in the allocation equitably of all sort of material pleasures. And they just see it as, well, we're doing the world a favour because we're actually bringing more people into the fold, and the overall proportion of the world is being elevated out of poverty. The problem is if you're going to sit there, we aren't everyone's poor box, but it's also if you're going to sit there and talk about sustainability. Okay, how about the mass importation of people who are from cultures and countries who have never even really used that much power before? I mean, there's still in remote parts of the world, there's indoor air pollution death is a leading killer of children. If you bring them over here and then you suddenly give them unlimited electricity, is there any wonder as to why supply and demand in the energy sector, for example, goes through the roof over time?
I mean, I don't know if they use more energy, but I do know the numbers are ridiculous, to say the least.
If you look at Michael Schellenberger's book, Apocalypse Never, there is a problem with actually onboarding grids in these countries because you can't leapfrog from things like wood and dung onto renewables because they don't have the generation capacity, because they don't have sort of sustainable use habits. And so you've got to have fossil fuels as a sort of interceding stage of development. So that just shows cultural practices and your sort of behavioral habits. If you mass import people, they don't have the time to adapt and sort of live as the Romans do in Britain. So therefore, you're going to have infrastructural barriers, cultural barriers, and also supply and demand issues, as with housing.
Yeah, and I just want to mention the numbers here for people who don't know about why 1 million is a lot for us. So the family visas apparently went up 90%, work visas up 130%, and university visas up 60%.
Yeah, that's a major issue. So my dad's a plumber, and he fits a lot of these high-rise buildings with all the ventilation and does all the plant rooms and things like that. And a lot of the time as well, a lot of these places, especially student accommodation and new builds in the Docklands, which was actually built by Chinese investment thanks to Boris Johnson during his time as mayor, they are occupied by very wealthy Chinese students. They come and they leave all their possessions, like giant teddy bears from Hamleys and full-built gaming PCs, just for the trash. But the lease is still on, so no one can occupy them. And so, again, as with Tony Blair being the ever spectre of awfulness, is
There's
it that
something that happened in the 1990s?
Exactly. Is it that his university reforms have basically turned every town, including Canterbury, I don't know if you've been back there fairly recently, but into these sort of giant high-rise of temporarily occupied student accommodation where people just flood in and they have no ties to the place and they flow out. And half the year, it's all empty.
Yeah. I mean, if you speak to any of the old guys in Canterbury, they're just like, yeah, this used to be a place, and that's just a joke.
Yeah, well, my girlfriend's just moved down there and lived there, and I can tell you it's very different. Same with Manchester. When I went to visit Party Conference, you go into the city and it's all the old architecture, and then you move outwards, and there's a gigantic ring of all these new high-rises being built, and it feels like the city's being encroached on by like an invading army of whatever, like Mega City 1. It's insane.
Well, that's literally what we're going for. If we go to the next one, there's also them. He goes on to whine in that tweet about like, oh, this is a good thing, the fact that we have a huge amount of more immigration, and also apparently the polling shows that Britons don't care about immigration anymore because of that, which is obvious bull.
Big doubt.
Yeah, but a guy from Breitbart here, Jack, just pointing out, no, it's just bollocks, but we don't have time for that. If we go to the next one here, I just want to mention, so the British aren't replacing themselves. We're importing loads of people, and we've been doing this since the 1990s, and since the 1990s, wages have been suppressed, and the house prices keep going up ridiculously. I feel like I've got a strong case here, is all I'm feeling. And if we look at this graph here, you can see this is just a graph of completions for houses as well. As you can see, keeps going up. I mean, you might say not as much as you need to keep up with the endless flow of migration, but there you have it. It's not like we're just not building houses. Like, there are plenty being built. It's just not fast enough to keep up.
Well, that massive dip as well for the pandemic, I'm going to cut off at the knees a sort of argument that, COVID is the reason for this. In 2018 to 2019, the first-time buyer rate only grew by 1%. It's like, I wonder why that was. It's a perfectly normal economic year.
But anyway, the average being here, 120,000 to 160,000 houses being built, 35,000 gap for the lockdown there. Thanks, government. If we go to the next one here, we also just have a stat, which is that apparently there's an average of 2.36 people per household. Just some website that has a number on this. But it means we're able to house around 280,000 to 340,000 people a year. That's what we're doing. Okay, well then all of that is just being taken up by the mass migration, which is around net 300 to 400,000. There you have it.
And including all the hotels as well.
So I mean, just every house we're building for an immigrant, essentially.
And they're also refusing some of them, as John and Carl covered in a weekend segment a little while ago. Some of the houses that we could definitely not buy in London, as Gove seems to have woken up to a little bit, they're saying, oh, £500,000 terraced house for my entire family that's just been refurbished. No thanks, I'll wait for a mansion. And we don't have the luxury of that, thank you very much. I could work all my life, and what is it, the first time buyer average age is 34? Fantastic, I'll sleep in my parents' cupboard under the stairs for the next 10 years.
Well, that's now. By the time you get to 34, it'll probably be 45.
Yes,
so.
fair point. Yeah, it's going to keep creeping up like the retirement age because we can't also pay for our social welfare systems, also driven up by immigration.
Yeah. If we go to the next one here, we just have a graph that just shows the numbers, as I was saying. It's just, there you have it. I mean, we're building enough houses to house the newcomers. That is it, really, when it comes down to it. And if we go to the next one here, there's also the most shocking statistic I've ever read. This is also from Migration Watch, which is peak natives owning houses was in 2012.
Good God.
Think about that. Just, okay, so the number of houses owned by UK-born people peaked in 2012 and has been going down ever since.
This is just what drives my suspicion that this is beyond incompetence and towards sabotage at this point, because you cannot look at this available information and go, we're on the right trend for 10 years.
Yeah, whereas for the foreign-born population, the number of houses they own as a group only goes up. Well, why? Because, we build the houses and then immediately go to the foreign-born population, not to the native-born population. Although the native-born population isn't even replacing itself, so why would they need endless mounds of megacities? Well, they don't replace themselves. Why would they ever need that? Why would we ever need to build endless more houses, Mr. Harwood?
Yeah, well, the only way to, not to use the most hated phrase in the world, but reset the sustainability of the housing market is to have, very much like the baby boomers did, a sort of generational gap. And this is one of the things I was looking at solutions. And someone also suggested, take the Churchillian approach of appointing a housing minister, build a certain amount, and then, again, I'm not a fan of government subsidies, but then over time you've got such an abundance keeping pace with population growth that you can do a sort of Maggie Thatcher Help to Buy scheme. But that's conditional on not mass importing over 1 million people every year, and instead allowing the domestic population to recover with a 20-year gap, and we're just not going to do that by all available metrics.
No. I also just did some quick maths earlier when I was arguing with someone on twitter.com about this, and we were like, okay, we need to build more houses still. And I'm like, well, we are anyway. But if you cut off the immigration at its legs, you end up with roughly end up building about the 300,000 more homes a year, which is exactly, coincidentally, what Harwood was asking for, which tells me something, which is that, yes, again, it is the immigration that is the problem here, not the lack of houses being built. That's such a weird solution. It's just like, don't you know that the poor immigrants don't have enough houses to move into?
I frankly don't care. Like, you had a house that you came from, not being funny.
Presumably as well. It's also cheaper over there, wherever you come from. But if we go to the next one here, we also have the fact that just number of houses, again, just going up. So the argument that, I don't know, we're just not building houses, just not true. I don't know why some people believe that, but apparently they do, so I have to feature it. If we go to the next one as well, we also have the fact that we have home ownership rates. Again, this is all thanks to Tony Blair. Something happened in the 1990s.
Yes.
Again. People who are struggling to read this graph, you can see its home ownership rate at 25 and 30 by birth year. And as you can see, it starts to fall down for the 30s there at 1970. So something happened around the year 2000, late 1990s, that meant that the people who were born in 1970 suddenly couldn't buy houses, for sure. And then those who are 25, as you can see there, are definitely not. 100% not. I mean, just good luck. Also, just what a different world it was in the past. I mean, being someone who's relatively young, you could see here just in 1961, if you were 30, there was a 65% chance that you had a home?
Oh, well, I've been fortunate enough to have quite a strong link with the past because I actually knew my great-great-grandparents. So she was a sort of like serf in a Lord Manor's house in Summerfield. Somerset, not Summerfield.
When she was a serf.
But so they came from that sort of background, trickled into the East End, and then grew up there. And my granddad was capable of on working since 15. He was a builder, and then he got his own place by 18. Was married and had one kid, and then eventually moved their way up the property ladder over time, moving out of the East End. Now, when you go back, he actually grew up on the street where the Olympic Stadium is. And all the new high-rise flats around there. He said, if I worked my entire life, I couldn't move in there. But they're being given away basically to people who have no investment, no ties to land, and also no sort of cultural sense of the rightness of cleanliness and maintenance of property. So they're there, they're quite transient, and then they're given something they don't take care of, and it just looks like an absolute dump. Like if you look at all the new places in Hackney, for example, that you drove through, the pavements are covered in rubbish immediately, and all of the new prefabs are just stained. There's rubbish everywhere. It's because you've got no investment in it.
It's not yours.
Yeah,
really.
exactly.
Yeah. If we go to the next one here, we can also see just the stat that annoyed me the most and made me want to do this, frankly. This is a graph that just shows the median earnings to average house price in England. And, of course, this being the best way to demonstrate how difficult it is to buy one, and if it's more difficult than in the past. As you can see here, I can only go back with the ONS data to about, I think that's 2000 there. It starts off. And then we have 2021 end at the top there, being the worst year ever.
God.
You can see.
Again,
The ratio is
go on.
5 times the average salary for
Dear God.
England. Sorry. And in London, it's 9 times the average salary.
Yeah.
Correct.
Well, the Conservative Party conference, I remember someone, I think it even might have been Priti Patel, talking about how migration depreciates wages. And I just felt like standing up and saying, well, then bloody do something.
Sorry, I misread that wrong. So in England, on average, it was 5 times your salary in 2002, whereas 10 years later, it's now 9 times the average salary.
Yes, it's nearly doubled.
That's how I'm reading it wrong. And, of course, you can see London as well, which is up there about, 14 times? So if you want a house in London...
don't bother.
Buy a toy. I don't know.
Yeah. But also, pretty much everything in London that I've noticed over the course of my 20-plus years being there is everything that's being built is pretty much rent-only anyway.
Yeah.
So you're going to have practically no chance of object permanence.
Which borough did you say you lived in again?
Bexley.
Bexley. All right. So if we go to the next one here, I don't know if it has it on, but just I also have the statistics for London.
This will be
which
interesting.
are horrific because, of course, as you can see, Kensington and Chelsea, 27 times the average income. Buy a home there. So that's a big no. But okay, maybe a rich area. Westminster, again, a bit of a meme. Camden. I know people who live in Camden, and they ain't ever owning a house on that. That's for sure.
No.
18 times the average salary.
Weren't they also the ones recently that did their own sort of like racial currency thing that was covered on the podcast a little while ago?
I don't remember that.
So they're screwing around with their borough economics. Meanwhile, absolutely no one can even afford to live there.
Sorry, they've got black bucks. Is that?
Yeah, essentially so. Yeah.
What?
What's up, my fellow minority? Would you like some Disney dollars?
Well, it's better than the actual money because you can't buy a house with it.
Yeah,
sure.
true. Fair point.
Sure. But as you can see, just every borough just go to hell. Like, you are not buying a house, that's for sure. And also, that's never going to get better, especially with the immigration continuing to only get worse as well.
Notice a lot of these are also Labour boroughs.
Yeah, there's also just a complaint I have, which is, if you go to the next one, I don't know why people don't talk about this. I don't know if I'm maybe an idiot for focusing on it. But just GDP per capita in the UK. It's just tragic as well. Because you have to remember, like, the houses are only getting more and more expensive. The wages are not going up. And as you can see, the average GDP per capita here, we're still poorer than Britain's in 2007.
Yeah, we've never recovered. It's also the factor of median household income is also a better indicator, and that's not going very well either.
No,
I mean,
but
look at the Trump administration. You lower illegal migration, lower legal immigration from certain countries. You have less red tape and more economic liberalism, and congratulations, you have a steady economy. But oh, my mean tweets.
yeah. But also you can see the fact that the United States at least has a more open economy and has been able to grow, whereas us and Canada as well, as you can see there, not so much, but us doing much worse as well, which is just embarrassing, frankly, and also why I can't stand either party at this point when they talk about the future, because they don't have one. But anyway, this is where I start to get my conspiracy hat on, I will be honest.
Oh, I love it.
So
are we going in the same direction? Because I feel like
I don't know. But if you go to the next one here, this is a video from, if you scroll down, I can't remember the name, some YouTuber who's very famous, quite like a guy, Ordinary Things, there we are, who made this video called London, the Dirty Money Laundry. Have you watched this?
No, I haven't.
Basically, the argument is, as he lays it out, going through the Panama Papers, that if you set up a shell company in the Cayman Islands, and they can own the property in London for you, you pay no tax.
Yeah, I've heard about this, actually.
If you want to own a house, basically you set up a company, put someone else in charge of it, and then they give you the house as like a company thing instead of a, here's a house thing, in which case you pay no tax whatsoever.
Well, this sort of international investment is just a suicide of our own making, because very few other countries are dumb enough to allow people to just walk in and enact fifth generational warfare on you and just snatch up all your assets. I mean, we've got tons of Chinese investment, and do you not think that all of those empty properties don't squeeze the demand somewhat?
Well, that's where I'm getting to, because it's not just the British elite who engage in such things; it's the global elite who do such things.
Yeah, we are basically a financial pit stop for Singapore at this point.
Yeah, so people to hide their money. But where do they hide it? They hide it in property. Well, in which case, what's their number one concern about that? Well, the property price better keep going up.
Yes.
Because if the property price goes down, then the investment wasn't worth it.
Yeah, you don't want a depreciated asset, yes.
No, and I don't think anyone's ever going to allow that to happen, especially a part of the global elite. who literally run the world and launder all their money through London, as ordinary things are actually very well documented. There's also the very funny aspect of all this, which it will never change, for sure, because, of course, the Americans even complained about this to our government. I believe it was Barack Obama who personally complained about this, because a lot of US companies and elites do the same thing.
Right.
And they said, well, can't you just, go into the Cayman Islands because we appoint the governors and just veto these laws that make them tax havens? And we said, well, they've got their own parliaments. And then they asked the Cayman Islanders, and they went, well, we've got a governor from the UK, so it's not our problem.
Yeah,
and
didn't do nothing, bro.
Everyone's just doing this, just like, nah, it's not my problem. Don't worry about it. So that's also going to last forever, for sure. There is no way that's ever going to be fixed. If we get the next one here, we have The Guardian, who managed to identify 2,800 houses in London that are being used for money laundering, including Bashar al-Assad's house, of course. There's also 36,000 odd properties that they have registered with offshore companies. So that's just the ones they can identify as money laundering.
Yeah, the Saudis have quite a lot as well.
Not the rest that are just being used as hiding money. Which, which is why I've got a bit of conspiracy hat on about this, which is I think that there's also a push for mass migration to keep the prices up, particularly in London. And if we go to the next one here, we have the fact that,
Oh, I was hoping you had this one, because I love this.
There's my argument, which is that, seems pretty bleeding obvious. The British don't replace themselves. We build loads of houses, but the house price only goes up.
It's impossible to say for definite.
Then we have full fact. They decided to go, well, is it the immigrants? It's impossible to say for definite. Say full fact. The fact checkers. Government analysis suggests immigration has pushed English house prices up by 20%. There you are.
Yep.
You're done. You're done for the day. Turn up. No. But says it's not meant to be a complete answer and should be used with caution. There is no consensus across other research.
Well, the funny thing is, and then when you scroll through this article, is the so-called refutations. One of the guys that talks about it eventually says he does admit mass migration has and could be an inflationary pressure on house prices. So the guy that they even fact check with then, coaches his argument and said, yeah, obviously more people equals more money. The best one is it says English house prices have risen 320% on average over this 25-year period. It's like, okay, well, if you're saying there's not something wrong there in terms of supply and demand, I'm just not going to believe you.
I mean, again, it's so bleedingly obvious. Like, the British do not replace themselves.
Yep.
And we're building more houses. What would you think would happen to the house price?
Yes, 52% of women over 30 now childless. And one, oh my God, that's hell. Two, who is coming up with all of the demand for instant housing?
We go to the next one as well. We have The Guardian, who then decided to go off and tell us that, no, actually, migrants are a good thing for house prices. They debunked it, as you might say. So they say, in some places, immigration actually lowers housing demand.
Yeah, I've seen this one before.
Can you think why? Because The Guardian go with the most spicy answer possible, and I don't think they were expecting that
I'm going
one.
to suggest it's white flight.
Yeah.
Is that what they're going to say? Yep.
Yeah. So, Philippa Sa, a Labour economist and academic, found that immigration actually lowers rather than raises house prices in some areas. Sa wrote that an increase of immigrants, equal to about 1% of the initial local population, leads to a 1.7% reduction in house prices.
Right.
More immigrants lower the house prices. Why is that, Miss Philippa? Why did you find that one out? She says, crucially, new immigration to an area may lower the average local income and decrease both housing demand and supply. Immigration often leads to outflows of natives, leading to a lower demand for housing, Sarah wrote.
There we go. So creation of satellite states in our own country equals lowered living conditions.
But then The Guardian present this as if it's an achievement. That's the best part. I mean, if you go back to the headline, the fact that they're like, whoa, why are you blaming the immigrants for the house prices?
Hey, it's equal. We all get the lowest common denominator.
Well, look what we're doing. We import loads of Somalis, and we love our Somalis, and the house prices go down. They're helping us.
Yeah, they're slashing them with machetes that they're carrying openly in the middle of the street.
But then it's just as if this is something you should accept as well, which is the best part of this, which is, okay, we're going to make some areas of this country basically unlivable. Her words, not mine. They bring down the house prices just by being there. Okay, so they're not livable for natives anymore. They don't want to live there, by definition.
It's like the unpopular kid sitting at the lunch table and everyone just gets up and vacates. And it's like, suddenly I have this all to myself.
Essentially, and they think that that's a positive thing. Because, okay, we're going to make pockets of the UK completely unlivable. And that means that those people have to flee to the last areas that are not covered in Tiberium. And those prices will then go up there, which means that everything's better off. It's like, right, so the elites get rich off property prices. And everyone else can go screw themselves.
And also, where you're fleeing to, if it's a nicer area, all the new builds look so universally ugly, and they're all prefabs because they've got conform to this sort of low carbon legislation anyway, that eventually you're going to be, so populations, native Britons are going to be going like ping pong balls between uglier and uglier areas to the point of where it's all just megacity.
Yeah, but I just love the fact that we've all gone full circle now. We've gone from it's not happening, or no, it's just that we need to build more houses, Tom Harwood's position, to now, yes, it is the migrants, but don't worry, that's a good thing.
It's a good thing.
It's always a good thing. And I thought I'd end this off with a quote from Zamor, just because he makes a very good point, as you can see here. I don't know if you follow Zamor's translation page. But
I do not, I should.
everyone should. So this is him responding to the wonderful world that is France these days. And he says in here, the solution is not more and more police officers. The solution is not a toll-free hotline. The solution is not to learn Krav Maga. And the solution is not to let's arm ourselves. The solution is to stop forcing us to live with people who hate us.
But that would be
France.
That would be common sense, and that wouldn't be pursuing the end goal of making sure we own nothing and be happy.
Yeah.
So, sorry, Zamor, it's a big club and you're not in it.
And that's the thing, which is he's obviously referring to the situation France is in. But in regards to the housing crisis in the UK, the solution is not build more houses. The solution is not yet another Help to Buy scheme, or so on and so forth. The solution is to stop importing people en masse.
Yeah.
We're building plenty of bloody houses.
Sustainable population growth is the answer.
Yeah. Anyway, that's something I've been looking into, and something that really triggered me in regards to Tom Harwood this morning. It's just like, yeah, we just need to build more houses. That'll solve the problem. It's just like, Tom, stop for 5 minutes. Think about
yes,
what you're saying.
I'm not taking your opinions on any real estate or gender issues. Thank you very much.
No, go off and have sex with a woman, and I suppose that will end that there. Otherwise, that's that.
I'm saying nothing.